Rain never used to bother Jessie Gardner. As a nursing student back then, she spent years walking through storms between hospital wings, damp scrubs clinging to her skin. But this rain felt different, like the sky was grieving with her. 6 months since the accident. 6 months since she answered the phone and heard the sterile voice on the other end say, "We're sorry. He didn't make it." 6 months since she held her belly alone, whispering promises to a heartbeat barely the size of a pearl. Tonight, the storm hammered her apartment building in Queens like a warning. Jessie pulled her cardigan closer as she walked down the hallway, the fluorescent lights flickering overhead. She had barely slept between nausea, grief, and the steady ache in her back that came with month 7 of pregnancy. Rest was a luxury. She opened her unit door, stepped inside, and froze. Before we get into the next thing she saw, tell me, where are you and what time is it right now as you watch this story? I love finding out where you, my audience, are listening from. Comment your city below and hit that subscribe button. Like the video too, so it reaches more people who love stories like this. Now, let me take you to where this started. She heard voices, male voices, 3 of them, and not friendly. Jessie's heart kicked hard against her ribs. Her hand drifted instinctively to her belly, protective. Standing in her living room, soaking footprints on her hardwood floor, were 3 men, all dressed in tailored suits as if eviction required couture. Edward Avery, the eldest, salt-peppered beard, arrogant posture, held a clipboard like a gavel. Wallace Avery, tall and thin, stood with a sour expression, his narrow face twitching with impatience. And Jeremy, the youngest, with eyes like sharpened coins, smirked as he lifted one of her framed ultrasound photos. "Cute," he muttered. "Hope you're not planning to raise a kid here." Jessie's voice was a whisper. "How did you get in here?" Edward flipped a single key from his pocket. "Master access. Building owner's rights." Her breath faltered. She felt the world tilt. "The building owner," she repeated softly. Wallace angled his chin downward, like a professor correcting a slow student. "Our father's building, which, now that he's passed, belongs to us. And you," he let his eyes travel slowly across her figure, "are trespassing." The word hit like a slap. "Trespassing," Jessie echoed. "I've lived here for 2 years. Dr. Farron offered me this unit himself." Jeremy rolled his tongue against his teeth. "Yeah, well, Dr. Farron was sentimental. He let a lot of charity cases in." Jessie swallowed the burn in her throat. "I cared for him," she said quietly. Her voice wobbled. "When he couldn't walk. When he couldn't remember his own birthday. I was there." Edward waved a dismissive hand. "And we appreciate your little volunteer moment. Truly. But that time's over. We're converting the building into something profitable." Wallace smirked. "Luxury condos. Starting at $3.2 million a unit." Her head snapped up. Luxury condos. In this economy, built on top of memories, sweat, and compassion. "You can't just throw me out," she whispered. Jeremy lifted a manila folder, slapped it against her kitchen counter. "Consider this your formal eviction notice. You've got 48 hours. Jessie's breath shook. "I'm 7 months pregnant." Edward's smile was chillingly polite. "Which means you should be grateful we're giving you 2 days instead of none." Outside the window, thunder rolled. The Avery brothers turned their backs and began wandering through her living room like appraisers. Wallace opened cabinets, muttered cheap, and kept moving. Jeremy poked at her baby bassinet with the edge of his pen. She felt anger rise like bile. "Please stop touching my things." Wallace's eyes narrowed. "Wrong tone." Edward clapped once loud. "We'll return tomorrow with movers. Pack fast." Jessie stood straighter than she thought her body could. "No," she said. The room paused. Edward's brow arched. "No, no," she repeated. "This is my home. You don't get to decide my life because you smell profit." Jeremy stepped closer, breath ripe with coffee and ego. "Listen," he hissed quietly. "Our father's charity ended when he died. And so did your free ride. Don't mistake pity for ownership." Her jaw trembled. Free ride. That's what they thought she was. A stray. A burden. A disposable piece of furniture. Her voice broke. "He wasn't just a landlord. He was my patient. My friend." Edward sighed dramatically. and we deeply appreciate the emotional struggle. But the law doesn't care about your feelings, sweetheart. Sweetheart. The condescension hit like acid. Wallace snapped photos of her apartment on his phone, documenting the condition. Standard procedure. Jesse's eyes burned. Get out. We'll leave, Edward replied smoothly, when we're finished. Lightning flashed outside, illuminating the tension in stark white. Jessie stepped in front of her ultrasound photo, the one Jeremy had ogled like decor. You will not touch that again. For a moment, silence hung heavy. Jeremy leaned back, amused. Feisty. Shame it's wasted. Edward tapped his clipboard. Let's wrap. We'll see you in the morning. As they turned to leave, Wallace paused in the doorway. Oh, one more thing. He held up his phone, screen glowing. We filed paperwork to remove you from all tenant records. Meaning legally, you were never here. The floor fell out from under her heart. You what? It's already filed, Wallace said, smiling. Try proving residency now. They stepped into the hall, dripping contempt. Jessie's knees buckled. She gripped the counter to stay upright. Rain hammered the windows like knuckles on glass. Her child kicked. A reminder. A heartbeat saying, stand. She wiped her tears roughly. She wasn't alone. Thunder boomed. Footsteps retreated down the hall. A door slammed. Silence returned. Jessie looked around her small apartment. The bassinet, the crocheted blanket Dr. Farron had knit during his lucid days, the teacup he drank from, the shelf he dusted lovingly. They wanted to erase all of it. She slid open a drawer. Inside, a thick, dusty envelope she'd been too afraid to open since the funeral. The return address. Farron and Denon Legal Group. Estate Executor Division. Her finger shook along the seal. She opened it. Her vision blurred. Inside, a deed, an account summary, a final note in Tim Farron's handwriting. For Jessie, the daughter life didn't grant me, but my heart chose. Tears exploded down her cheeks, and the number on the account, $3 million. Lightning fractured the sky. She exhaled long and ragged. They didn't know. They had no idea. She wasn't powerless. Jessie Gardner closed the file, spine straightening. They thought she was easy to throw away. But tomorrow, the Avery brothers would meet the law, and the law would speak her name. The next morning, the sky above Queens turned gray, heavy as stone. Rain had stopped, but the air still felt soaked, thick with silence, grief, and exhaustion. Jessie Gardner moved slowly through her apartment, one hand at the small of her back, the other tracing the rim of her teacup. She hadn't slept. Every creak in the hallway had sounded like boots. Every shadow had felt like another threat. But she had something now. Proof. A letter. A will. A miracle wrapped in paper that still smelled faintly of Dr. Farron's cologne, cedar, and citrus. She set it gently on the kitchen table and stared at the signature at the bottom. To Jessie Gardner, for her kindness, loyalty, and humanity in my final days. Her breath trembled. The room blurred, and her memory pulled her backward, to the quiet hum of oxygen machines, the shuffle of slippers on hospital tile, and the soft rasp of an old man's voice saying, "You remind me of my daughter, if I'd had one." Flashback, 2 years earlier. Dr. Tim Farron had been a man of immense pride. Even his cancer hollowed him out. His children, the Averys, had inherited his property, but none of his patients. They visited rarely, holidays at best, always with one eye on his accounts. But Jessie had been there every day. She'd helped him dress, cooked him meals he could stomach, and sat beside him when pain wrung the air from his lungs. She had seen him through his worst nights, when he begged her to stay because silence is too loud when you know it's almost over. And she stayed. She talked to him about her dreams, nursing school, starting a clinic one day, maybe even a family. He'd listen, nodding, sometimes smiling weakly. "You've got a heart for people," he'd said once, voice dry as paper. "That's rarer than gold. Promise me you won't let this world harden you." When he could no longer sign his name, she helped him guide the pen, unaware that one of those signatures would later tie her name to everything he owned. He never told her that part. Back to the present. The pounding started just after dawn. 3 knocks, then a voice dripping smugness. Time to vacate, Miss Gardner. You've had you 24 hours of grace. She froze mid-step. The Averies. The paper under her door fluttered in the draft. Another notice. This one stamped final warning. Her lights flickered once. Then again. The power cut. Her refrigerator fell silent. She turned toward the window and saw them. Edward and Jeremy, standing on the curb, coffee cups in hand, watching like spectators at a play. Wallace filmed on his phone, pretending to document the process. Jeremy called up, loud enough for neighbors to hear. "Hey, you sure you're not squatting, Jesse? Don't make this worse for yourself." Laughter followed, their laughter. The word squatter echoed like a stain. Curtains in nearby apartments shifted. People were watching, phones out, faces lit by screens. Jessie's heart clenched, but she didn't open the window. Instead, she walked to her kitchen, lit a candle, and sat down at the table. The silence felt almost holy. She spoke softly, the way she always did when she wanted her baby to know she was still trying. "Hey, little one," she whispered, hand resting on her belly. "We're still here, okay? They can turn off the lights, but they can't take what's ours. We'll stay gentle, even when they're not." The baby shifted under her hand, a tiny, stubborn flutter. Tears filled her eyes. Outside, laughter faded. The brothers left eventually, muttering about lawyers and deadlines. But inside, Jessie Gardner found her resolve sharpening. She looked again at the envelope on the table, Farone and Denon Legal Group. Her reflection shimmered faintly in the glossy seal. She didn't need to yell. She didn't need to fight like they wanted. She just needed to wait for the right knock. Because when the right person showed up, the Averies wouldn't just lose a tenant. They'd lose the illusion of ownership entirely. And Jessie? She'd finally have something no eviction notice could ever erase: a home. The hallway of the old Farone building echoed with every step Jessie took. It was mid-afternoon, the kind of dim, gray day that made the fluorescent bulbs hum louder than usual. The air smelled faintly of wet paint and dust. She carried a small grocery bag pressed against her hip, prenatal vitamins, a loaf of bread, and chamomile tea. Small attempts at comfort in a world that had stopped feeling safe. But safety was something the Avery brothers didn't intend for her to have. When she turned the corner toward her apartment, she froze. The brothers were already there, leaning against the wall like wolves guarding territory. Edward, the eldest, still wore his expensive overcoat, unbuttoned like a statement. His phone was in hand, his voice casual but sharp. Wallace leaned against the railing, tapping a lighter against his palm. And Jeremy, always the one with the camera, lifted his phone the moment he saw her. "Look who's back," Wallace said, his smirk thin and cruel. He pushed off the wall, stepping deliberately into her path. "Got tired of hiding, huh?" "I'm not hiding," Jessie said quietly, her voice steady though her hands trembled around the grocery bag. "Sure you aren't." He took a step closer, close enough that she could smell his cologne, bitter and metallic. "You know, for someone who's not family, you sure made yourself comfortable in my father's home." Her chest tightened. This building was part of his will. Edward laughed, a short, humorless sound. "Oh, that's rich. You mean the fake will. The one you probably helped him write when he was doped up on morphine." She blinked hard, stunned by the venom in his tone. "How dare you? How dare we?" Jeremy cut in from behind his camera, the red light blinking. "You think people don't see what you did? My father trusted you, and you took advantage of that. You took advantage of us." Jessie stepped back until her shoulder brushed the wall. "I didn't take anything. I cared for him when no one else did." That made Edward's jaw tighten. He leaned in, voice dropping low. "You think that makes you a saint? You were a nurse, Jessie. Not his daughter. Not his wife. Not his blood." The word blood stung deeper than she expected. Wallace bumped her shoulder as he passed, sending the grocery bag tumbling. The prenatal vitamins scattered across the floor, rolling under the baseboards. "Oh, sorry," he said with mock sweetness. "Guess I didn't see you there." Jessie bent down quickly, trying to gather the pills before they disappeared into the dust. But Jeremy crouched nearby, still filming, the phone's camera inches from her face. "This is gold," he muttered. "Look at her, pregnant and pathetic." "Stop filming me," Jessie whispered. "Why?" Edward sneered. "But you can spin the story again. Poor widow, abandoned, Evicted, mistreated by the rich family? You've already got the whole building fooled. That broke something in her. She looked up, eyes shining with tears she refused to let fall. Your father saw something in me you never did. Humanity. That's all I ever showed him. Edward's face hardened. For a flicker of a second, she saw something else behind the anger. Guilt, maybe. But then he turned away, muttering, "You'll be gone by Friday." They walked off in a cluster of laughter and insults, leaving her in the hallway, surrounded by her spilled vitamins and the weight of their hate. Inside her apartment, Jessie sat on the edge of the couch, the ultrasound photo in her hands. The corners were creased from how often she'd held it. The little white blur at the center, her baby, was the only thing keeping her grounded. She pressed the photo against her chest, whispering, "You and me, okay? Just us." The room was quiet except for the faint hum of pipes in the walls. She looked toward the ceiling where the water stain had spread again overnight. The whole building seemed tired, like it was holding its breath, waiting for someone to fix what had been broken. There was a soft knock on her door. When she opened it, she found two tenants from the third floor, Mrs. Alvarez, the retired seamstress, and Mr. Davis, the security guard who worked nights. They looked nervous, glancing over their shoulders before speaking. "We heard them earlier," Mrs. Alvarez said, her wrinkled hands twisting the edge of her shawl. "The Avery boys. They're saying you'll be gone by the weekend." Mr. Davis frowned. "They told the maintenance crew to cut your power next. Said it's building policy." Jessie swallowed hard. "It's fine," she lied. Mrs. Alvarez shook her head. "It's not fine, dear. You don't deserve this." She reached out, touching Jessie's arm. "Don't let them take this place. You've been good to us. You looked after Dr. Farron. You deserve to stay." Her words caught Jessie off guard. For weeks, she'd felt invisible, an intruder in the very home where she'd once been needed. Now, hearing the tenant's support cracked something open in her chest. "Thank you," she whispered. "But they've made up their minds." "Then make up yours," Mr. Davis said. "You've got people behind you. Don't forget that." After they left, Jessie stood for a long moment staring at the peeling wallpaper. Her hand drifted to her stomach again. Outside, laughter echoed faintly from the courtyard. The Avery brothers again, probably rehearsing their next insult. She walked to the window and pulled the blinds halfway down. The light hit the ultrasound photo, still clutched in her hand, making the edges glow. It wasn't just paper anymore. It was proof that something beautiful could still live inside pain. An hour later, a sound interrupted her thoughts, the sharp slap of tape being pressed against her front door. She hesitated before walking over. The air in the hallway had gone still again, like the building was holding its breath. The notice was bright orange this time. Final utility termination, 24 hours notice. Her heart pounded. They were cutting her water and heat next. At the bottom of the page, she noticed a scrawled note in Edward's handwriting. "Next time, try paying rent with your sob story." She tore the notice down and stood in the doorway, breathing hard. The hallway was empty now, their footsteps already fading. The camera light from one of the upper floors flickered. Someone was watching again. Recording. Jessie crumpled the notice in her fist, but instead of crying, she felt a strange calm spread through her chest. Because she knew something the Avery brothers didn't. Dr. Farron's will wasn't the only thing with her name on it. There was a folder, sealed, notarized, and marked for delivery, that held the real truth. And when the right person arrived to open it, the Avery legacy would crack wide open. She set the ultrasound photo gently on the mantel beside a candle and whispered, "Let them come." Then she turned off the lights herself. If they wanted darkness, she'd give it to them, until the truth shone so bright they couldn't stand to look. The rain hadn't stopped all night. It slid down the old windows in uneven trails, tracing the same tired lines Jessie had memorized weeks ago. The apartment was silent, save for the rhythmic hum of the refrigerator and the occasional creak from the pipes above. She couldn't sleep, not after the eviction threats, not after seeing her unborn child's reflection in the glass and wondering where they'd go if the brother succeeded. But something inside her stirred, an instinct or maybe memory. Her eyes landed on the old oak dresser across the room, the one that had belonged to Dr. Avery. It sat in the corner like a ghost, untouched since his passing. The bottom drawer had always been stiff, the handle slightly bent. He used to joke that it held the dust of forgotten things. Tonight, she couldn't ignore it. Jessie rose from bed, careful not to wake the building's groaning floorboards, and walked toward the dresser. Her fingers trembled as she knelt down and pulled gently at the drawer. It resisted, just like she remembered. With one last tug, it slid open, releasing a faint scent of cedar and old paper. Inside were neatly folded ties, a cracked leather wallet, and beneath them, an envelope sealed with the deep red wax of his personal insignia. Her breath caught. The envelope was thick, its edges crisp despite time. A folded sheet of parchment peeked from beneath it, alongside several documents, stamped, notarized, and embossed with the Avery family seal. And resting at the very bottom, catching the dim lamplight, was his brass ring, the one he never took off in life. Jessie's hand hovered over it. She remembered how he used to twist that ring when he was thinking deeply. It was his habit, like a metronome for his mind. She lifted it now, feeling its cold weight, and in that instant, she could almost hear his voice again. "Patience, Jessie. Some truths are meant to wait." She swallowed hard and broke the wax seal. Inside the envelope was a handwritten letter, the ink slightly faded, but his handwriting unmistakable, strong, deliberate, looping at the edges. "Jessie, you stayed when blood left. You listened when they shouted. You saw me not as Dr. Avery, but as a man learning how to be human again. I've watched my sons chase wealth and lose themselves in it. You gave me something they never did, peace. This building is yours. Protect it. Keep it alive. Within these walls, you gave me more family than I ever had in name. Avery." Tears blurred the words before she could finish reading. The paper shook in her hands as her mind tried to process what it meant. That all the cruelty, all the humiliation she'd endured these past weeks, stood on a foundation that was already hers. This was it, the hidden power. Her fingers brushed over the embossed signatures on the notarized documents, the transfer of ownership, the updated deed, all legally binding. Everything Edward, Wallace, and Jeremy thought was theirs was, in truth, her inheritance. But instead of triumph, what she felt was stillness. A deep, quiet calm. Because she understood something they never would. Revenge shouted, justice whispered. She could end their arrogance with a single phone call. But not yet. Not like this. She folded the documents neatly, returned them to the envelope, and placed Dr. Avery's ring beside it on the dresser. Her reflection in the mirror looked different. Not broken, but anchored. She reached for her phone. Her thumb hovered over one contact name she hadn't used since the funeral. Clara Kingsley, estate executor. The line rang once, twice. Then a composed voice answered. "Ms. Gardner," Clara said, her tone warm but knowing. "I was expecting your call." Jessie exhaled softly, staring down at the open drawer. The proof, the promise, the legacy. "Then you already know why I'm calling," she said quietly. A faint smile could be heard through the phone. "Let's finish what he started." Outside, thunder rolled across the city. And for the first time since Dr. Avery's death, Jessie felt something close to peace. Not because she had power, but because now she had purpose. The morning came hard and gray, soaked in that kind of light that made everything look colder than it really was. Jessie had been up since dawn, sitting on the couch with a cup of peppermint tea that had long gone cold. Her hands rested over her belly, feeling the soft, rhythmic motion beneath her palm. The baby always kicked hardest when the world felt most uncertain. Then the sound came. A violent bang rattled the front door. Another, then another. She rose slowly, her heart thudding. The pounding grew louder, heavier, accompanied by muffled shouts and the unmistakable clang of metal tools. Outside her window, she saw them. Edward in his gray suit, jaw tight, Wallace pacing with his sleeves rolled up, and Jeremy, smirking, phone camera already recording. Behind them stood a locksmith, his tool bag at the ready, and a sheriff's deputy who looked deeply uncomfortable but resigned to his role. From the upper floors, tenants began peeking over railings, whispering, filming. Children crouched on the staircase, eyes wide as the scene unfolded. Jessie moved toward the door, steady but calm. She didn't shout. She didn't plead. She simply unlocked the chain, opened the door a crack, and looked each of them in the eye. "You can knock," she said softly. "It's still my home." Edward's voice snapped like glass. "Not for long. We gave you every chance to leave peacefully, Miss Gardner. But you don't seem to understand. This isn't charity housing. It's private property." Wallace spat the word private like a curse. Jeremy tilted his phone to catch Jessie's face. "Smile for the camera," he said, his voice dripping with cruelty. "Pregnant squatter claims millionaire's building. Our viewers are going to love this." A few tenants gasped from the hallway. One muttered, "Shame on you." Jessie didn't flinch. Then, another voice sliced through the noise, sharp, feminine, and cold as winter. From the curb, a silver sedan door slammed. Out stepped Margaret Avery, their mother. She wore pearls and grief like armor, her chin high, her lips pressed in disgust. The brothers straightened instantly. Margaret marched up the walkway, heels striking the pavement like drum beats, and stopped directly in front of Jessie. Her perfume was as strong as her disdain. She raised a manicured hand, pointed directly at Jessie's belly, and declared loudly enough for the cameras to catch every word. "That child is not part of this family. You are nothing but a mistake my husband left behind." The silence that followed was electric. From a second floor, a neighbor, Mrs. Patel, the retired teacher who'd always slipped Jessie soup during her first trimester, stepped out onto the landing, voice trembling with fury. "Neither were your sons," she snapped. "Not when their father was dying and begged for company. Jessie was there. You weren't." The words hit like thunder. The tenants murmured. Someone clapped once, hard. Another joined in. The ripple spread through the building like fire. Wallace turned red. Jeremy lowered his phone. Edward barked, "Enough," but the crowd didn't care. The locksmith hesitated, tools halfway out of his bag. "You still want me to do this?" he asked the deputy quietly. The deputy shifted uneasily. "Ma'am, maybe we should verify." "Do it," Edward cut him off. "We have full authority." The man crouched by the lock, tools clicking. The metal groaned, then cracked. The sound echoed like a gunshot through the hall. Jessie didn't step back. She didn't raise her voice. She just stood there, one hand on her belly, the other holding the edge of Dr. Avery's ring on the chain around her neck. Her voice came low but unwavering. "I'm not leaving." The deputy paused. Even the locksmith froze. For a long, stretched moment, no one moved. The only sound was the hum of the city outside and the faint buzz of Jeremy's camera, still recording. Then a single line of dialogue, calm, defiant, shifted everything. "If you force that door open," Jessie said, "you'll regret it. Because the person who truly owns this building is about to arrive." Edward laughed, short, disbelieving, but there was something in her tone, something measured, that made even him hesitate. Then, from the distance, a car horn blared. A black sedan turned into the courtyard. Every head turned. Jessie didn't look away from the door. Her calm deepened. "Right on time," she whispered. And with that, the wind seemed to shift, a quiet before the storm that was about to redefine who truly held power on that street. The courtyard fell into an eerie stillness, the kind that hangs in the air right before a storm breaks. The brothers froze mid-motion, the locksmith's wrench suspended, the deputy's pen halfway to his clipboard. Only the whisper of drizzle filled the silence, each drop tapping rhythmically against the cracked pavement. Then came a sound. Not sirens, not shouting. A single deep horn, low and resonant, the kind that made your chest vibrate. Heads turned toward the gate just as a black sedan rolled slowly into the courtyard. Its headlights sliced through the gray morning fog, cutting across faces like interrogation lamps. The car door opened with a sharp click of precision. Out stepped Clara Kingsley. Her heels struck the wet concrete like metronome beats, deliberate, clean, absolute. The rain didn't dare stain her. Her navy trench coat flared behind her, as if the wind itself obeyed her timing. In her hand, a leather folder, thick and waterproof, gleamed beneath the overcast light. Whispers rippled through the crowd. Is that? Wait, that's a lawyer. Oh my God, is she hers? Jessie stood motionless at the door, one hand bracing her belly. The baby kicked again, almost as if sensing the shift in air pressure, the moment before justice arrives. Edward straightened, chin lifted, tried to reclaim the illusion of control. Who are you? He demanded, forcing authority into his voice. This is a private family matter. Clara's gaze didn't even flicker toward him. She stepped closer, her heels punctuating every word. Private family matter? She repeated. Then it's about time someone from the actual family stepped in. The crowd murmured. She stopped at the porch, rain speckling her hair like glass dust, and pulled a single sheet from the folder, stamped, signed, notarized. My name is Clara Kingsley, she announced, projecting her voice so every camera, every phone, every trembling neighbor could hear. Executor of the late Dr. Avery's estate. And whoever touches this woman, her home, or her unborn child will be charged immediately with coercion, trespassing, and unlawful eviction. Her words hit the courtyard like thunder. The deputy's hand froze. The locksmith stood up straight, tools dropping to his side with a metallic clatter. Even Jeremy's phone wavered midair, his smirk dissolving. Wallace's voice cracked through the shock. Her property? The question hung between disbelief and dawning fear. Clara turned, her expression calm but lethal. She raised the folder slightly, enough for the embossed Avery family seal to glint beneath the streetlight. Yes, she said, her property. And if you'd taken the time to read your father's will, which, by the way, you ignored, you'd already know that. Gasps rippled through the watching tenants. Someone in the back whispered, It's hers? The whole building. Clara stepped past Edward and Wallace, brushing their shoulders with deliberate disregard, and ascended the porch steps to stand beside Jessie. The power shift was complete, two women framed in the doorway, steady against a crowd of men unraveling. Jessie's eyes glistened, not with tears but with something harder, vindication, quiet and earned. Clara placed the folder gently into her hands. You don't have to explain anything anymore, she murmured. He made sure you were protected. Edward clenched his fists, voice rising like a last, desperate defense. This is absurd. My father would never. Clara cut him off with a raised hand. Your father, she said evenly, was a man who believed loyalty mattered more than blood. He left this property, and several others, to Ms. Jessie Gardner, in gratitude for her years of care, service, and compassion. The camera phones caught every word. Wallace took a step back. Jeremy stopped filming entirely. Even their mother, Margaret, who had been glaring from the curb, took a small involuntary step behind her sons. Rain began to fall harder now, like punctuation, like applause. The tenants who had once whispered from doorways now leaned closer, some even smiling through disbelief. Clara turned slowly, facing the crowd, then the brothers again. Her voice lowered, every syllable crisp and merciless. If any of you continue to harass this woman, she said, I will personally ensure that the Avery estate presses charges. And trust me, I never lose. The courtyard went dead silent. A gust of wind tore one of the eviction notices from the wall, sending it spiraling into a puddle. The red ink bled away in the rain. Clara glanced at it briefly, then back to the brothers. Her final words landed like a gavel. You really should read your father's will. And just like that, everything froze. Cameras captured the moment. The lawyer's calm poise, the dripping eviction notice, Jessie standing in the doorway with one hand over her child. It was the precise second when power changed sides. The beginning of the Avery family's reckoning, and Jessie Gardner's quiet triumph. By morning, word had spread like wildfire. The Avery complex lobby, usually quiet except for the hum of old elevators and the smell of coffee from the corner cafe, was now overflowing. Tenants, neighbors, and strangers pressed shoulder to shoulder, phones lifted like torches. Every light flickered with anticipation. Clara Kingsley stood at the center, a mahogany folder open in her hands. Behind her, Jessie sat on a folding chair, hands gently resting on her belly, the faint hum of security guards forming a wall around her. Across the lobby, the Avery brothers, Edward, Wallace, and Jeremy, waited with clenched jaws and red faces. Their mother, Margaret, hovered like a hawk behind them, eyes sharp with disbelief. When Clara spoke, her voice didn't need a microphone. It carried, crisp and unflinching, through marble and echoes. Under the authority granted to me as executor of the late Dr. Harold Avery's estate, I will now read the updated provisions of his final will and testament, signed, notarized, witnessed, and recorded 6 months prior to his passing. The murmurs faded. Phones tilted upward. Clara unfolded the first page. Her tone was solemn, but her gaze, steady, surgical, never wavered. To my sons, Edward, Wallace, and Jeremy Avery, you were given opportunities, resources, and every advantage I could provide. Yet in my final days, none of you came home. A murmur rippled through the crowd. The brothers stiffened. You will, therefore, receive no inheritance, financial or otherwise, from my estate. Gasps. A few people clapped before remembering where they were. Clara continued, her voice unwavering. To Ms. Jessie Gardner, who cared for me with dignity, patience, and compassion until my final breath, I leave full ownership of the Avery residential complex and its attached assets. Additionally, a $3 million trust is hereby established in the name of her unborn child, with rights to access upon reaching the age of majority. The lobby exploded. Cheers, cries, disbelief. Someone shouted, "She owns it all." Another voice, "Good for her." Jessie's breath caught. Her hands flew to her mouth as tears welled. Around her, tenants who had once tiptoed around the Avery brothers were now smiling, clapping, even whistling. But across from them, rage. Edward lunged forward. This is a setup, a forgery. She manipulated him. Wallace slammed his fist against the wall. Jeremy's phone was already up again, recording, shouting to anyone who would listen. She's not family. She's a caretaker. She doesn't deserve a dime. Clara didn't flinch. She simply closed the folder, her expression poised and clinical. Gentlemen, she said, this document was signed, notarized, witnessed, and video recorded. Every frame, time-stamped. Every signature, verified. Every witness, still alive. So if you'd like to challenge it, I strongly advise you to first consult your own legal representation. It was a mic drop, and the crowd knew it. The cheer that followed was loud enough to rattle the light fixtures. Margaret's voice cracked, sharp and desperate. This is humiliation. You're destroying this family's name. Clara turned her head slightly, calm as ever. No, ma'am. I'm simply reading your husband's words. Silence. Jessie rose slowly, still shaky, still overwhelmed. A single tear rolled down her cheek, not from fear, but from release. She whispered softly, to no one in particular, he remembered. In the corner, the building's tenants, those who had once been too afraid to speak, started chanting quietly. Justice for Jessie. Justice for Jessie. The brothers could only watch as every phone camera zoomed in. The moment that had started as an eviction now lived online as a reckoning. Wallace's knees buckled. He dropped hard to the tile floor, eyes glassy, sweat dripping. He looked up into the swarm of recording lenses, dozens of them, and realized that no amount of shouting could undo what was already public. A single flash popped from someone's phone, capturing it all. The mighty Avery sons, brought low in the lobby their father built. And Jessie Gardner, standing in the same frame, unshaken, finally free. The lobby that had once echoed with shouts of accusation now hummed with tension so thick it could be felt in the air. Phones were raised again, hundreds of them, ready to capture the end of a saga that had turned from tragedy to triumph. The sheriff, a broad man with silver at his temples, adjusted his glasses and turned the final page of his file. Everyone waited. Edward and Wallace whispered frantically to one another. Jeremy kept filming, his lips tight, his camera trembling. Their mother stood behind them, her pearls askew, muttering prayers that sounded more like curses. The sheriff cleared his throat. After review of the late Dr. Harold Avery's last will and testament, and confirmation of executor authority by the state probate court, he paused, the weight of his words hanging like a gavel in midair. The eviction order filed against Ms. Jessie Gardner is hereby reversed. Gasps filled the lobby, then cheers. Loud, wild, unstoppable. It was as though the entire building exhaled at once. The sheriff raised a second sheet, stamping it with a hard, echoing thud. Effective immediately, the Avery heirs, Edward, Wallace, and Jeremy, are ordered to vacate all Avery complex properties within 48 hours. The sound of that gavel-like stamp might as well have been thunder. Phones flashed like fireworks. Tenants, those who had watched silently for weeks, began to chant in unison. Avery out! Avery out! The chant built into a roar that spilled down the staircases, through the hallways, out into the courtyard. Margaret Avery's shrill voice cut through it, trembling with fury. This isn't justice, it's robbery. My husband was confused, manipulated. Her words bounced uselessly off the marble walls. Jessie stood a few feet away, calm as glass, her hand resting protectively over her belly. Her voice, when it came, was quiet, but it carried farther than any scream. You lost the day you walked away from him. It silenced the crowd for a moment. Even the sheriff turned slightly, as if acknowledging that truth. Wallace's face twisted. You think this means you won? You think you belong here? He lunged, rage snapping like a whip, but two deputies intercepted him before he reached Jessie. His shoes squealed against the polished floor as they dragged him back. Cameras caught every second. That's assault, Mr. Avery, Clara said, her tone sharp as a scalpel. I'd advise you not to add another charge to your week. The crowd murmured, laughter breaking through the tension. Wallace hung his head, chest heaving, humiliated. Clara turned to Jessie then, her composure never slipping. She reached into her folder, the same one that had carried every page of proof, and drew out two objects, a folded deed and a small silver key that glinted under the fluorescent lights. She pressed them both into Jessie's trembling hand. It's official, Claire said softly. Your name is on everything. This building, the land, the trust, all of it. It's yours. Jessie looked down at the key, smooth and cool against her palm. The same kind of key she once used just to unlock a rented apartment. Now it meant home. It meant legacy. It meant freedom. Tears welled in her eyes as she whispered, "Thank you." Claire smiled faintly. "Don't thank me. Thank the man who saw you when no one else did." The crowd began to disperse, still buzzing, still filming, still murmuring disbelief and awe. Outside, the afternoon light broke through the clouds, pouring gold across the building's brick facade. Jessie stepped forward, holding the key high for just a moment. The chant resumed, softer this time, not as a fight, but as a celebration. Avery out. And beneath that sound, quieter still, Jessie whispered to her unborn child. This is where we begin again. The camera flashes caught her mid-smile, key in hand, the very picture of grace after battle. The woman who had been nearly evicted from her life now standing at the door of her own empire. The night sky hung soft over Queens, the kind of quiet only found after a storm that has finally spent itself. The Avery complex glowed in the dark, 100 warm lights burning behind its brick walls like small testaments to survival. Jessie stood on the rooftop terrace where Dr. Harold Avery used to sit with his evening tea. The skyline shimmered in the distance, Manhattan's lights flickering like a promise she'd finally kept. The wind lifted her curls gently as one hand rested on the curve of her stomach. Down below, laughter floated up from the courtyard. Neighbors were celebrating, music spilling faintly from open windows, the sound of clinking mugs and soft gospel humming. Tenants who had once feared eviction now walked freely under the lights, holding candles, cookies, even little paper hearts that said, "Welcome home, Jessie." Clara Kingsley stood a few steps away, her navy suit replaced with a simple shawl, her posture softer now that the battle was over. She leaned against the railing, watching Jessie with the calm admiration of someone who had seen true grace under fire. "You did it," Clara said quietly. Jessie turned, smiling through the glow of the city. "No," she said. "We did it. You just made sure I didn't let fear win." Clara laughed softly, shaking her head. "Dr. Avery would have been proud. He saw something in you none of them ever did." "I think he saw what I couldn't see in myself," Jessie replied. She glanced upward, to the stars hiding faintly behind the haze. "That kindness isn't weakness. It's power that doesn't need to shout." For a long moment, silence filled the rooftop, the good kind, the kind that hums with peace. Then the sound of commotion drifted up from below, reporters shouting questions, camera flashes igniting the courtyard. Jessie and Clara walked to the edge of the terrace, peering down. There they were, Edward, Wallace, and Jeremy, once so smug, now dragging suitcases under the blaze of paparazzi bulbs. Their designer coats hung unevenly, their eyes hollow. Margaret Avery stood in the middle of it all, her pearls gleaming, but her expression cracked, shouting into microphones about injustice that no one cared to record. The crowd's whispers were merciless. "Those are the ones who tried to evict the pregnant widow. Can you believe it? They lost everything. Good. Maybe now they'll understand what family really means." The IT wasn't revenge that filled Jessie's chest as she watched them disappear into the night. It was relief, the stillness of knowing that the truth had done the work for her. Clara placed a hand on her shoulder. "Closure looks good on you." Jessie smiled faintly. "It feels like breathing again." She turned back toward the rooftop garden, the same one Dr. Avery had tended every Sunday afternoon. The soil still smelled faintly of mint and rosemary. She knelt beside the small wooden bench he used to sit on and whispered, her voice tender but steady. "You were right, Harold. Some families leave when it's hardest, but the ones who stay, they make home mean something." Her palm moved gently over her belly. "You'll never be homeless," she whispered to the child within her. "Never unwanted. You'll grow up knowing that love is the foundation no one can tear down." A hush fell as the tenants came up to the rooftop, one by one. They brought candles, cookies, and paper lanterns glowing gold against the cool wind. Children carried little bouquets of daisies. Old neighbors hugged her with tears in their eyes. The entire community, the people the Averys had once looked down upon, now stood shoulder to shoulder, forming a quiet circle around Jessie and Clara. If Jessie's story touched something in you, take a second right now. Tap like, hit subscribe, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I read every single one. And if you want to see what Jessie does next, or watch another powerful story where betrayal turns into justice, check out the 2 videos pinned right here on your screen.